The IELTS reading test is a race against the clock. Any small change that you can make to your exam strategy can have a huge effect on your score. In today's video, we're going to be looking at 9 tips to help you with the IELTS reading test. Coming up. Welcome, my name is Eli and I run the website EnglishProTips.com, where we help students get ready for the IELTS test. Now, in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at 9 tips to help you with the IELTS reading test. But before we do that, it's important to know some information about the reading test. So, first of all, you have 1 hour to do the test. In the test, you'll find that there are 3 sections, so 3 passages or 3 texts that you have to read, and in those 3 sections, you'll find 40 questions in total. Now, each question is worth 1 mark, and you don't lose marks for incorrect answers. So it's always worth guessing if you don't know the answer. You can write the entire test in capital letters if you want. Remember, you don't have extra time to transfer your answers at the end. When the test finishes, the test finishes. Now, you also need to know that there's a different reading test for the academic and general IELTS. This mainly has to do with the kinds of texts that you'll find in the test. The general IELTS tends to have, say things like articles on choosing the best builder, or articles that you will find in everyday reading. However, in the academic IELTS, the passages tend to be longer and slightly more complex, and they tend to be on academic topics, although you don't really need to have any academic understanding in order to read and understand these texts. There's also a difference in what score you need to get your desired band score. For example, in the academic IELTS score, you would only need to get 30 out of 40 in order to get band 7. In the general IELTS, you'd need to get 34 out of 40 in order to get band 7. So you can see that here and also here. Okay, let's get stuck in. Let's look at some of the tips to get band 9 in the IELTS reading test. The first tip is to structure your approach. I'll show you what I mean. So as I mentioned, there's 3 sections to the IELTS reading test. In each section, there's a certain order that I would do things in. First of all, I would glance at the questions. So glance means just to look quickly at the questions. Don't get stuck into them. When you glance at the questions, just identify the question type. After that, read the text quickly. This is also referred to as skimming. While you're reading the text quickly, you're going to highlight or underline things like names, dates, names of theories or location, things that help you to understand the layout of the text. This is also going to help you answer the questions later on. You also want to make a note, whether it's on the piece of paper, the question paper, or a mental note on the layout of the text, so what you find in each paragraph. The purpose of this skimming is to help you know what part of the text you're going to read in detail when you answer the questions. Now, the final part is to actually tackle the questions themselves. So, when you're reading through the questions, underline words in those questions that help you to understand what the question is asking you to do, or what the difference between the different options is. We'll be able to practice that together. Okay, so number 1, structure your approach, and I recommend this 3-part structure. Tip number 2 is, well, if you don't know the answer, skip it. I'll show you what I mean. Remember, for most question types, the answers will come in order. So for example, look at this question. We need to find a word from the text to complete this summary. So what you'll find is that the answer to question 21 will be more or less at the top of the text. Below that, you'll find 22, 23, and 24. So the answers come in order. Now, as a result, if you don't know what the answer to question 22 is, just skip it and move on to 23. By answering questions 21 and 23, you'll have a better idea of where in the text the answer for question 22 is. You can always go back and look for the answer afterwards. Now, I did say that most question types have the answers in order, but that's not always the case. So there are certain question types that have the answers in order, so things like multiple choice, true, false, not given, or also yes, no, not given. Sentence completion, summary completion, match sentence endings, short answers, and labeling questions. However, there are still some questions that don't have the information in order. For example, matching headings, or matching information, or matching features questions. As a result, it's important that you understand which questions you'll find in order in the text and which ones you will not. Now, question number 3 is to understand these question types. So all of the question types that I mention here, you should have practiced before. Now, the best way to practice this is actually just to do past paper questions and make a note of which question type you are answering when you're doing your practice reading tests. That way you're going to become more familiar with those question types. A good idea is also to identify which question types you struggle with and spend more time on those question types. As a little clue, it's usually true, false, not given, and matching headings that most students struggle with, but it might be different for you. So practice and find out which ones you find easier and which ones you find more difficult. Tip number 4 is to work on your speed reading. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, first of all, we can read the question first. Now, when we're reading in our first language, we always have a purpose for reading. For example, if we're reading a dictionary, we're going to have a different approach when compared to reading a novel. For example, when we're reading a dictionary, we're just going to scan all the words to try and find out what it is we're looking for. When we're reading a novel, we're going to take our time so that we can imagine the scenery and what's happening to the characters. The IELTS test is no different. You should read the questions first to identify how you're going to tackle the text. Are you going to scan through the text quickly to look for names, or are you going to work out which part of the text has the answer and read that part in detail? So by knowing this, we're going to be able to read more quickly. The second thing is, don't try to understand everything you read. Remember, the purpose of the IELTS reading test is to get a high score, not to understand everything in the text. So even if there's parts of the text that you don't understand, if there aren't questions related to that text, it doesn't matter. Don't spend time rereading parts of the text just to fully understand it. Spend time answering the questions. Another thing that you shouldn't do is to sub-vocalize, unless you're reading for detail. Now, sub-vocalizing is when you read and you're speaking the words out in your head. So for example, you might notice small movements with your tongue. Now, people have found that when we sub-vocalize while reading, we don't read as quickly. So only sub-vocalize if you're trying to concentrate on a particular part of the text that you think has the answer. Otherwise, don't sub-vocalize. Practice this before your test. Number 4, don't reread sentences. Okay, so remember when I said to skim read the text before you answer the questions, don't find yourself rereading sentences that you don't understand. The purpose is just to get a general understanding of the text. However, when we're reading for detail, which is when we've identified the question and we're looking for the answer for a specific question, at that point, yes, reread sentences to try and make sure that you fully understand the text and you're getting the right answer. The final tip is to do a lot of practice tests. You can't avoid this. If you want to get a high score and you want to be able to read quickly in the IELTS reading tests, you need to do lots of tests. You need to be familiar with the types of text and the type of questions that appear in this test. Okay, tip number 5. Try different time allocations. I'll tell you what I mean. So, as you'll know, there's 3 sections in the reading test and you have 1 hour. So it would seem logical that you spend 20 minutes on section 1, 20 minutes on section 2, and 20 minutes on section 3, right? Wrong. Section 3 is the most difficult, section 1 is the easiest. So as a result, some students try to spend only 15 minutes on section 1, 20 minutes on section 2, and then they give themselves 25 minutes on section 3. And in that way, they are giving themselves more time for the tricky passages and the tricky questions. In fact, some students even do section 3 first. They know it's the most difficult, so they go straight to section 3 and afterwards they do section 2 and 1. You can choose the order that works for you. The important thing is that you decide on this before your IELTS test. Don't decide this on the day. Do lots of practice and find out what works for you. Now, throughout this lesson, I've emphasized the importance of skim reading, which is what we do before we start focusing in on the questions. I would recommend that you can skim read passage 1, so section 1, in 2 minutes, passage 2 in 3 minutes, and passage 3 in 3 to 4 minutes. Practice this before your real test. Maybe even use a phone or a clock to time yourself to make sure that you are skim reading and not reading for detail. Tip number 6, be careful of spelling mistakes. Now, some people who do the IELTS test on a computer do this. They copy and paste the answer from the text into the questions, and in that way they're not going to have a spelling mistake. However, if you're doing the paper-based IELTS reading test, make sure that you don't make any spelling mistakes in the test. You'll lose marks, and this is a silly way to lose marks in the test, although it happens all the time. Number 7, if you really don't know, guess. You can just guess the answer. You're not going to lose any points if you get them wrong. In fact, I would suggest that you consider leaving the multiple choice and true, false, not given questions till last, and I'll explain. So this is a multiple choice question. This is a question where you have to find a word in the text, and this is a true, false, not given question. So if you guess the answer for a multiple choice question, well, you have 4 options, sometimes just 3, and in that case you have a 25% chance of getting the answer right just by guessing. Similarly, in true, false, not given, there's 3 different options. It's either true, false, or not given. So by guessing, you have a 33.333% chance of getting it right. However, if you guess in the sentence completion or summary completion task, you have less than 1% chance of getting it right because there's so many different words that it could possibly be in the text. So if you know that you struggle with completing an IELTS reading test on time, and many of you do, consider leaving the multiple choice and true, false, not given, also yes, no, not given, till last. Okay, number 8, practice at home. Probably the most important tip in today's lesson. In fact, this is Yash, who got a band 9 in the IELTS listening test. And when I spoke to him, I said, how did you get such a high score in the IELTS listening test? And he said this: I did the Cambridge practice tests so many times that I knew all the answers by heart. Now, bearing in mind there's 16 tests, or 16 books of Cambridge practice tests, and each book has 4 tests. And I know he also did some extra tests on YouTube as well. So that gives you an idea of how many tests Yash did in order to get band 9 in the IELTS listening test. So how can we practice at home? Okay, well, I recommend 3 different stages of your practice. Stage 1 is all about skill development, and this is what we're going to focus on when we have, say, 3 months before, or more than 3 months before our IELTS reading test. In this stage, we're going to take one passage at a time, so one section at a time, and we're not going to give ourselves a time limit. The purpose of this is to become familiar with the kinds of texts and kinds of questions that appear in the test. So we're going to do passage 1, and then we're going to look at the answers and focus on which questions we got wrong and why. We're trying to learn from this experience. We're also going to look holistically, so on a whole, about which question types we find most difficult. So, do we struggle most with yes, no, not given, or matching headings, or summary completion? The whole point is we become more analytical and more conscious about our learning process. We're also going to record any new words that we learn. So, for example, in our vocabulary book, we're going to write down any new words that we learn. Okay, in stage 2 of our learning, and this is going to be when we have, for example, 2 months, or maybe between 1 and 2 months left. In this stage, we're going to do one whole test at a time, and we're going to time ourselves. So we're going to give ourselves 1 hour, and we're going to do the full IELTS reading test in its entirety. We're going to track our progression. So what did we do? What did we get when we did Cambridge IELTS Book 16 Test 1? What did we do when we did Cambridge IELTS Book 16 Test 2? And we're going to map our progress, and hopefully it will be progress. Hopefully we'll start to see higher scores coming out. Again, we're going to be analytical. Which questions did we get wrong and why? And we're going to continue to record new words. Okay, stage 3 is right before we have our IELTS test. So for example, 1 week to 1 month before our test, we're going to focus on doing all of the tests in the same day. So we're going to be doing the listening test, the reading test, and the writing test at the same time. The purpose of this is to build our stamina. And of course, we're also going to be checking that we get the answers right or wrong and why we're getting some of them wrong. Okay, for this I suggest that you use the official Cambridge IELTS books. So remember, if you're doing the academic or general IELTS test, there's going to be a different book that you need to buy. So work out which one you're doing and get all of those official Cambridge books. They are invaluable practice. Finally, tip number 9 is to read extensively. Now, most of you, or some of you, will know that there's a difference between extensive reading and intensive reading. Okay, so extensive reading is when we read a large amount of material for a general understanding. So we're not consulting the dictionary, we're reading lots of different texts with the purpose of getting a general understanding of those texts. Intensive reading, on the other hand, is when we have shorter texts, but we want to fully understand everything in those passages. So for example, we can answer lots of different types of questions about the passages. So the IELTS test is more similar to intensive reading. We're tested on our understanding. But when we read for pleasure, for example, when we read all of the Harry Potter books because we want to find out what happens to Dumbledore, we're extensively reading. Now, I recommend extensively reading books or novels or articles that you're interested in. Things like all of the Harry Potter books, or perhaps reading The Economist to find out what's going on in your country or in the world. Okay. Now another student that got a band 9 is this guy. This is Ahmed. He's from Syria, and he also got band 9 in the IELTS reading test. He said this: I read articles every day. I read the articles I wanted to read, extensive reading, and I read for enjoyment first, good extensive reading. After that, I would read again to learn the new vocabulary. So he reads extensively, and then he afterwards reads intensively for the purpose of learning a language. Okay, so the important thing is that we create a habit of reading in English. So for example, I like to read last thing at night before I go to bed. I also like reading very early in the morning. Find the times that you like to read and get into a habit of reading English regularly. Important is to find books and articles that you want to read. So articles or books that you're interested in. You're not just reading just to learn the language. This is very important. As a result, you'll probably read novels. For example, I was recently speaking to a student that liked to watch the film first and then afterwards to read the book, because they found that if they already knew roughly what happened and the rough storyline, they could understand the book better and they actually enjoyed it more. Similarly, read news articles that you're interested in. For example, I was speaking to a nutritionist that likes to read nutrition articles in science journals in English. Great. Okay, the final thing is read graded readers. Now, graded readers are readers that have been or novels that have been changed slightly so that people without a fully proficient level of English can understand them. Now, this is a great website that you can find graded readers in. What you can do is divide by, filter the books by level. So for example, if you've got a beginner level, an intermediate level, an advanced level, or a proficiency level. And you can also browse through the books to find the books that interest you most. So for example, you can find things like Animal Farm by George Orwell, or maybe Elon Musk's biography. The idea is you find the books that interest you most and you make a habit of reading these books regularly. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about your approach to reading. Remember, we always have discussions in the Facebook group as well, and this week we've really been talking a lot about what kind of methods we have for reading, what we find difficult about reading, and what we also like to read in English. So come and join the Facebook group if you haven't already. Best of luck with your studies, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye then.